we come from Sydney in Australia, and there was 3 brothers. One going to school with Kirk, that's Tim going to school with Kirk. Andrew, the middle brother, going to school with myself. And John was going to school with Andrew and I as well. Gary we found at the beach. And it was just a couple of very early bands falling to bits and ending up, together. We thought, Johnny was the last member to join, I guess, so we were looking for a good drummer, and it was like the kid brother, the Farriss' kid brother. Oh yeah, I guess we'll give him a go, and he was very good. And so we've been the same member since. It was about 5 years ago, and we started up in the North Shore of Australia. It's the beach areas, and we played a lot of surf clubs and the big beach pubs, a lot of surfy fans, things like that. And we slowly moved around Australia through the suburbs and cities and that. And took we got a contract, and we've done 4 albums now. So it's been very progressive, up. It's very strong, slowed up and up and up.
Yes, Mum and Dad were very supportive, but I still remember having to have the serious discussion with Mum and Dad about Johnny leaving school so that we could play more gigs, and they understood, and he was only 15 at the time and he really started school, so but it was good that they encouraged us all the way, In fact, Dad really sort of got us all started in music, and that Dad actually sort of bought us all our first instruments, and when we all turned sort of the age of 8, he'd say to each one of us, what would you like to play? Like for me, he said, would you like to play the trombone or the guitar? Thank God I picked the guitar. I don't think the trombone would suit me somehow. I think it's very good for Australian bands because it's not at all an easy audience to please, because there are so many bands all trying to do the same thing. And until recently, it's been that way. Where you sort of had to go out and prove yourself live first for at least 6 months to a year, and then if you could prove to the record company sort of thing that you'd get a bit large following, and so on and so on, and they could see the progression, although it's really changing rapidly now.
I think it initially, it has to make it easier, because the world starts focusing on Australia, instead of having that incredible first rung on the ladder of people actually taking it seriously. That's all sort of gone now, and I think most people think beyond kangaroos and beer and whatever from Australia, and they realise there is actually a creative art scene, and there's a music scene there, and there's a movie scene and books, etc., etc. So from that, we feel like we're on equal ground now. So from there on, I hope that Australian bands will just be considered as bands, not Australian bands, international bands from now on. If that happens, I'll be really happy. I think there's a lot more bands in Australia, and a lot of them are going to have to get overseas to really make people have an even better idea of what's going on. It's still only a few bands, really, that have got overseas. I guess, I'm in a work of the first Australian band that made it on Australian terms. In other words, they didn't go overseas to play, say, LRB, to go and play American music better than Americans could play it.
Or Air Supply.
Or Air Supply, Olivia, etc. They're one of the first bands to even have a surprise hit in their own country, And nobody knew who they were in Australia. They were doing a support with us when they had a #1. And so it's that sort of situation is really good. And you learn that you hear about things, you learn the good and bad points of overseas. You get an idea of what's going on, because mainly all these bands know each other, so that's a good start. We're not that competitive in Australia, because everybody's quite original, I think.
Well, as I was saying before, we spend about a year working very, very often in the pubs and that sort of thing. I think in our first year as INXS, we played to I don't know how many people, but we played about 280 shows or something incredible, literally 5-6 nights a week, and we did that for a whole year until we actually signed a contract. And then we did our first album, which was our debut album, just entitled INXS, and that did very well and went gold. which was nice for a debut album. And then we recorded Underneath the Colours, which was really studio album. The band kind of getting their heebie-jeebies off in the experimental sort of fashion. And we did it with an old sort of a really old, well, not really old, but what am I saying? Richard Clapton was a so from the late 60s, I guess, singer-songwriter from Australia, which is kind of interesting because we were sort of one of the newer type bands, and we wanted some of his influence, and I think he, cleverly enough, wanted some of ours, and on his next album. And then we did Shaboo Shabaa, which is the third album, and that was the first one to be released overseas. It was released in America, and ended up being top 40, and we had a hit in America too off that album called The One Thing, and so we went over there and we spent a lot of time there last year touring America. We spent 7 months, I think, touring all over the States, and then we came home via England to record The Swing after doing the original Sim with Nile Rodgers in New York. Well, yeah, especially me, because being the guitar player, I really like his playing on the Bowie album, which coincidentally is mostly him. And exactly, I mean, he only played the solo on Let's Dance. That's all he did. I mean, Kalle Salomar played quite a bit as well, but I know Nile's playing so well, because I've got just about every album Chic ever made, and he's worked with Michael Jackson, and I've got to take my hat off to him as a guitar player. I think he's fantastic. So I was, when he actually walked into our dressing room, and said, "Can I have a beer with you guys?" I literally sort of nearly fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it. And so I was probably a little more knocked out and nervous about working with him than some of the other guys in the group. And none of us really knew what to expect from him as a producer, but really he surprised us all by just partying, basically. He just wanted to party, and he was very positive. We only did the song twice, and he, from a production point of view, he really didn't do as much as we all would have expected him to do, because after chatting with him in the dressing room after the show where we met him, he was telling us about another group he'd been working with, a young band from Canada, that he'd had, a few problems here and there with, and it took him a long time to produce their album and that. So we were thinking, he might be one of those producers that takes everything apart and puts it all back together bit by bit. But no, it was completely the opposite. Virtually, the original Sim was recorded live. It was a jam.
No, actually, it's the opposite is the problem. It's just a sensitive issue, I guess, and it's nothing that we can. I wouldn't put it down to not being that successful because of that. But no, I think it's more of it's a sensitive spot that people don't want to be reminded of. In South Carolina, they don't want to talk. They don't want to know about a song that deals with anything to do with that. And people want. It's down to boring things like advertising time. An advertiser won't sell advertising time to a radio station because he doesn't like the idea of the song. And really, the song was about. It's meant to be positive. It's meant to be about dreams and holding on to them, and things like I guess shock things like assassinations like Martin Luther, and trying to break away from that, trying to as he said, he has a dream.
It's election year at the moment too, which is causing a few things with certain people running for presidency and all that, and I just think basically it was just a bad timing, really. They don't want to be reminded about anything that even brings up the subject of racism, which is a shame, really, because Nile Rodgers, who produced it, is black, obviously, and it's more really the white people that I think are objecting to it.
When we wrote it, Andrew and I we're just thinking of New York and the dance clubs, and just really getting into the dance clubs. We used to record a lot of the KLAB and all the black radio stations, and I guess we wrote it with that in mind. and it was a dance hit, you know. So that was good. That's what we got. And the last thing we thought of was it being hit in Australia, and it was. It went to #1. So I don't know what's going on. I have many accents.
And it's American today. Who knows tomorrow? It could be Turkish.
Well, we went into the Manor. We worked with Nick Launay. He's a young, like one of the new breed producers, I guess you could call him. And he liked the Manor for the drum room. So we did about 2 months there doing mainly rhythm tracks and some vocals and guitars and things like that. And we also used some East and West. We used a bunch, really. We used about 6 studios in this album. And we went back to Australia and finished it there, mainly, in a place called Rhinoceros in Paradise. And we really like the English studios. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Paradise is the place. No.
On the head.
Almost. On the head, yeah. It's different places have different, different countries have a different idea of what a good sound is, strangely enough. I mean, to Nick, he goes into a studio in Australia, some studio, and he goes, no, that's nothing like what I want. He just won't touch it. And to the Australian producers, it's perfect. So I guess it's different strokes, but I think it worked out well. It's a nice mix. Nick's a very unusual producer. He uses very new techniques. He doesn't really touch reverb and things like that.
Yes, that's very true. But we thought, well, the longer we leave it till we come back and play here, the more exciting it'll be when we do. And now that we've had a taste, we all sort of can't wait to come back. So we look like coming back in September to England to play. But we had to do a lot in Europe, basically, because the Original Sin has been very popular in a lot of countries there. We had #1 in France with it, and it's top 10 in places like Belgium, Portugal, Italy, all that sort of thing. And there's still, Europe is such a vast sort of expanse of countries. It takes a long time to get to all of them as well. So we spent a lot of time touring France and Germany, and we did some shows in Belgium, and we sort of this show we've just done in England now is the last show we'll do on this part of the European tour until next September. Not at all in Europe. We've had in a couple of places in France. You sort of you got the language thing there. You see, so as soon as you hear some rowdy English voice coming from the audience, you sort of think immediately, especially when they call out old songs from albums that were never even released over here, you sort of think, oh, there's an Australian out there, But we don't really like that too much. It's very nice to be supported by them, and we really appreciate it. But we want to prove ourselves on our own grounds, on our own terms, in new countries. Which is a big reason why we'll be coming back here and doing a lot more shows in September.
I can see it, and I've heard it being said. I've heard it being said by older people, where they cannot relate to our social patterns now are utterly different than what they once were. It's a fact, really. Family life, for one thing, is an utterly different concept, And what I'm trying to say is, we will be a generation, by the time, instead of being sort of 50 and going, gosh, the world has changed, it happens so much faster. It's happened to me now. I'm 24, and I'm trying to catch up with computers, And if I can't get that together by the time I have children, I'll be gone, It's just, I guess it is, it really is quantum leaps now. It's not every 100 years that we go through major changes. It's like every 10, 15,
It has been a lot to a lot of Australian bands, especially in the past. I think it's changing a lot now. But, for instance, unfortunately for a lot of bands, I nearly mentioned a name, which I won't, they've come home after having enormous success overseas. And it's a real shame. Can't sell a ticket. And whereas we didn't really know how to avoid that, but we just followed our instincts when we went overseas last year, and we kept on talking to people back home and releasing new videos and new singles, and coming, sort of breaking the tours up by coming home for a month or so, and then going back, and then coming, you know, and that seemed to keep things fairly in touch, because while we were overseas, in fact, early this year, touring Europe for the first time, the Swing was released and went into the charts nationally at #1, so it obviously wasn't hurting us any, and we're very grateful for that. But then again, our success in Australia has been much, as Michael said earlier, sort of a progression, you know, a much steadier sort of, in leaps, certain leaps, but it's taken like 4 years to get where we did. So I think a lot of our fans are very much loyal ones, and you know, and also we never forget where we're from. You know, we'll never pack up our bags and go live, I don't think, in LA or something like that. We'll always remember that we're Australian, and that's where we're from.
It's a new age for Australian music, and it's a new way to approach the rest of the world. We've always considered that we can be an Australian band and do overseas tours and come back, and that somebody's got to be able to do that one day instead of going to live overseas. You know, nothing wrong with that, but you know, we've grown up. The Australian music has grown up now. You don't have to go and stay at somebody's place for the rest of your life. You know, it's fantastic. You know, it is everywhere. You know, same with going to New York and stuff like that. Oh, we all really. I think England is a place you direct. Bands have always directed their focus at, in Australia, as far as a serious music scene, you know, where the real stuff has come from. At the same time, most of this band was brought up very much on American, Philadelphia, you know, New York, Motown scene, you know, as well. So there's those two poles that sort of attract us. I don't, you know.
That's what we're working on at the moment. We'll finish up our American tour towards early September. Then we come back, hopefully, for some more shows in England. We want to play, you know, up some of the outside of London areas as well, and we have to do a certain show in Germany that we're looking forward to, and then we do our second tour of Japan after we leave here, which is another place that is very much happening for the band. We actually really have a fond place in our hearts for Japan, because it's in the Pacific and it's close, and it's only 8 hours from playing by plane, you know, whereas it takes us 30 hours to get from Australia to here.
Yeah, depends where we are. You know, we play it by ear. In England, I think we're probably going to be, who knows, but at the moment we're working as an album band, you know. And we're just going to take our time here, you know.
We've actually, if I can add to that, we've never actually really sat down and tried to write a hit record, you know. It's never, we're a bit selfish as far as writing when it comes to things like that. We'd rather write a whole mess of stuff and just see what comes out of it, you know. Fortunately, it's always worked for us in other parts of the world, and I have no doubt it won't do the same here.